Hey, my little bugs. How my sugar plums doing? This is your girl, the goddess of Georgia Peach, coming at you. So listen to some Manapee Hall, Astro theology.
To some of you, the discussion we are going to carry along in this series may be a little more novel, but many are already aware of the existence of at least the symbolic factors with which we are to be concerned. The possible relationship between astronomy and religion has been so often discussed that nearly all Bible students, the students of comparative religion,
I don't like the way that's
are aware that such analogies or parallels do exist. To some of you,
Yeah, that's better.
the discussion we are going to carry along in this series may be a little new or novel, but many are already aware of the existence of at least the symbolic factors with which we are to be concerned. The possible relationship between astronomy and religion has been so often discussed that nearly all Bible students, the students of comparative religion, are aware that such analogies or parallels do exist. We are interested, therefore, in determining, if possible, their validity and what they have contributed to our general knowledge of man's beliefs. Perhaps astrotheology would be a useful instrument as a common denominator of religions, for elements of it and traces of it are to be found throughout the world. In some way, for some reason, and the origins are obscure, these concepts unfolded together with man's religious and philosophical ideas and became almost universal. Now, how does this happen? The most obvious answer lies in the original unity of arts and sciences in the religious life of people. The first stargazers on their tall towers or ziggurats in the land of Babylon, these stargazers were astronomer priests. There was no differentiation between science and religion. We may say that almost certainly sciences were originally cultivated because of their religious content, or for the reason that they helped to support the religious convictions of the people. We know that the temples were the first colleges, and the ancient towers and palaces of the gods were the first astronomical observatories. There is a legend, which some of you may have run across, to the effect that the constellations were named by shepherds who, watching their flocks at night and with very little else to do, allowed their imaginations to trace the imageries by connecting stars into patterns in which some likenesses or appearances to various creatures could be traced. I think these shepherds were the shepherd priests or the shepherd kings of old times, the keepers of the sheepfold, which was the ancient name for the temple. In any event, many words that we use, many terms that we commonly find in our language, arise from the religious astronomical reflections and contemplations of our ancestors. Actually, as one of the ancients observed, astronomy is the science of the anatomy of the universe. And to a measure, these same ancients believed that the universe was the body of a blessed God. Therefore, astronomy might be termed the anatomy and even the physiology of the body of the deity. This deity being represented as this God who is extended and distributed throughout the infinite diversity of his own parts and members. In any event, at a very remote time, men learned considerable about astronomy. It is quite likely that there have been cycles of remembrance and forgetfulness in this subject. A. Wallace Budge, keeper of the Egyptian and Assyrian antiquities of the British Museum, declared that the Chaldean astronomers watched and measured and charted the motions of the heavens for more than 25,000 years. Now, of course, from a man of his standing, this is a rather unusual statement. And yet I'm certain that he felt that he could prove it. This tremendous amount of observation, even without the instruments that we know today, must have led to a variety of discoveries. We feel, for example, that ancient man was greatly limited in his astronomical researches by his lack of a telescope. Yet we also have record that the ancients knew certain things about the solar system in particular, which it seems impossible they could have known without some kind of a telescopic equipment. Perhaps the Chinese have the answer. On the wall of the city of Peking, there is the remain of an ancient observatory. It was partly reconstructed by the early Jesuits, but the instruments are essentially Chinese, and they have a complete observatory without a telescope. Now, what they did to meet this peculiar need was a masterpiece in optics. They discovered that by using a long, hollow tube without a lens, they could restrict the light of the sky and concentrate the energy going into their own eyes. And by means of these tubes without lenses, they were able to make a number of observations which would not normally be possible to the individual. They were able to give us a very clear understanding of many peculiar details. For instance, we find in other parts of the ancient world the full and obvious knowledge that the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Persians at an ancient time knew definitely that the planet Venus was never visible to us as a complete sphere, but most often like a minute lunar crescent. They also discovered in the field of Babylon the rings on Saturn, and the ancient deity of the Babylonians, corresponding to the deity Saturn, is always shown standing in the midst of rings which circle his body. These things are not just accidents. They tell us that at a long ago time, men made comparatively accurate observations of the world in which they lived. Pythagoras, writing or teaching about 600 years before the beginning of the Christian era, was one of the first to note that the planets and their chariots, the chariots of the gods, circled around the blazing altar of the sun. He is accredited generally with the first statement of the heliocentric system of astronomy as we know it today. How then have we forgotten all these things? The only answer is that in the waste of time, in the destruction of learned institutions, in the gradual decadence of the great temple mysteries, conquest, pillage, war, and destruction, Many choice and valuable records were hopelessly destroyed, as in the case of the destruction of the great Serapean and Brockian collections in Alexandria. Thus, we dropped a dark curtain across history, having obliterated most of the early relics and records of man's intellectual life. We have every knowledge, then, that in the general and broad need of the world, ancient man was reasonably well equipped. He knew the earth was round. He was aware of the Western Hemisphere long before the beginning of the Christian era. And according to Plutarch, the historian, the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the Great Lakes area of the United States was explored by Grecian navigators at least 15 to 1800 years before its rediscovery at the time of Columbus. And of course, Columbus really was searching for a passage to Asia. He did not realize in the beginning that he had discovered a new continent. These ancient records and many legends and myths and fables all point out things that we should know, but which we have gently ignored. It is almost certain that the Chinese navigated the coast of California 2,500 years ago. And during the period of Genghis Khan, 12th, 13th century in Mongolia, the Chinese and Tatars were well aware of the Western Hemisphere. We have forgotten a great deal. And we have forgotten a great deal of the source of what we call existing knowledge and the reason for it. And many things which we consider to be superstitions and legends really developed from a very astute observation of natural phenomena. One thing that ancient man had that we do not have is leisure. Now, the common man of his day, whether he was a builder of pyramids or an agriculturist, probably did not have much leisure. But there was a very broad, deep, scholarly class, particularly the priesthood, then the custodians of all knowledge, who not only had leisure, but an infinite kind of patience, which also runs short with us. This is the kind of patience which will permit a problem to be passed down through 20 generations without impatience. Observations and reflections were not carried on by small groups in a period of months, weeks, or even years, but became the projects of empires and of dynasties and of descents of families, so that one problem may have been labored over for 1,000 years, each generation, each century, bestowing its own fragment of further insight. Thus, by observation with great patience, man accomplished much. Another factor which had something to do with all this was man's dependency upon himself. Today we are no longer dependent upon the faculties and powers with which we were originally endowed. We have supplemented these powers and faculties by innumerable devices, depending more and more upon mechanistic substitution. We no longer need or call upon the resources of our own observational powers. Some years ago, an experiment was carried on one of the American Indian reservations, where it was demonstrated that a certain Indian of reasonable attainments, not a cultured man as we would term one, just a man who lived with his flock, watched them at night like the shepherds of old, and lived as our primordial ancestors lived, this man could distinctly hear a watch ticking in a man's pocket 65 feet away. We have no such power of hearing as this. It's gone, because we have no need for it. The present moment, we pick up the phone and get the correct time. Our entire way of life, when someone wants us to get out of the way on the road, they give us a blast we can hear a mile away. the individual no longer needs these faculties. He does not need them for his survival. He does not have to scent game. He does not have to scent danger. And with the way his smog is now, his senses wouldn't last long anyway. But in any case, he certainly, in those days, had the clearest and most complete possession of his faculties. He lived simply. He ate simply. His foods were not denatured. His life was not filled with unnecessary artificial tensions that close in our modern man. He could contemplate. His mind was not disturbed by the confusions that we know. And while he had his problems and his troubles, most certainly, he lived a simpler way of life. And with this simpler way, he was close to nature. And his intuitions, his inspirations, and his revelations had an authenticity which we cannot deny. For we know that all forms of knowledge that we boast today originated in times when the powers and faculties of man must have supplied him with the total instrument with which he worked. He had to be able to produce these things out of himself. And because of that, we marvel at algebra, we marvel at geometry, and all of these forms of learning, but they came from the past, from long ago. Man has improved upon it, but in the dawn of time stand the shadowy figures of the originators. And these figures, some way, stand head and shoulders above those who have made new and useful applications of these first great dynamic thoughts. And in this group of dynamics belongs our problem of astronomy. Now, in astronomy in those days, we involved another term, which perhaps has fallen likewise into evil times, and that is the term astrology. It is unlikely that, with the exception of navigation and the calendar, that ancient man studied astronomy from any great, profound interest merely in the heavens and their motions. His interest was in meaning, not in motion. He was searching the heavens for truths, not facts. He was looking for dynamics. And always his problem was to apply his knowledge to the immediate problem of his own existence. And out of these long observations, which perhaps gradually evolved his concept of the seasons, came the calendar, a method of determining the periodic return of seasons, the eccentricities of the calendar, and many interesting details. The Egyptians, for example, had a calendar which corresponded with a circle. 360 days in the year, 360 degrees in the circle. But they gradually came to discover that this was not quite right. They found their year getting badly out of order. So they created 5 intercalendary days. And they set these days aside and apart. And to these days they assigned the birthdays of the 5 principal gods. Interesting also to bear in mind that the Chinese and the old Egyptians and the very early Greeks did not have a septenary system of planets as later came into existence, but as the Chinese call them, the 5 emperors, the 5 great sidereal emperors. For the Egyptians and the Chinese were well aware of the fact that the sun and the moon were not planets. Medieval man did not know this, however, and constantly combined the planets and the luminaries to form his septenary. But the older people, like the Egyptians, decided that these 5 days should be the birthdays of the planets, and they set them aside. We are working now with a calendar reform project, and the only way we can make it work today is by the introduction of intercalendary days. So that now the thought is that we shall no longer have a 365-day calendar with leap years and other inconveniences, with the days of the week falling on different numerical days of the month and so on, but that we shall go back to the old idea of having 360 days, 360 degrees, and set aside the 5 days, not this time as birthdays of the gods, but now as our 5 world holidays, which would not be counted. They would be the intercalendary days. In this way, we could simplify many contrivances and problems, but would make life very difficult for astrologers, who would have the problem of trying to determine this equation in correcting charts. Down in Central America, where the Sun-Venus calendar was represented on the scales of the great dragon, which the feathered serpent of their philosophy, it is said that the great deity of the Quiche Maya complex, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, that this deity gave them the calendar, the Tonalamato, the book of the sacred days. And by this calendar, which was ornamented with the symbols and devices of the gods, the world and time both were divided into epochs, eras, and compartments and separate units, and to each was assigned a deity. These people went so far as to assign a divinity to each hour of the day and night, anticipating the medieval astrologers' planetary hour system. All through the ancient world, the calendars and the gods went together. One of the first uses of the calendar probably was to determine religious feasts. And we still have this concept in the church calendar and saints' days and many other similar devices. The calendar then served a great many purposes. First and most, however, it served man to observe the seasons of his planting, of his reaping. It told him when to watch in Egypt for the inundation of the Nile upon which his life depended. It taught him to prepare for the rigors of winter in other climes. It gave him an accurate way of measuring the annual climate of his world. It also told him that each of the changes of the seasons brought new forces into play in his environment and the conditions under which he existed. Each of these changes had its good side and its bad side. Each brought something if he could know how to use it. Each took something away. Therefore, he must provide at certain times. Tithing came from putting away the seed, 10% of the seed for the next harvest. And gradually our agrarian ancestor found that the heavens in their motions regulated his crops, which the farmer of our own generation also has learned to know. Experimentation on farms in Arizona under the Department of Agriculture has shown definitely that there is a relationship between the growth of plants and the various phases of the moon and things of that nature. So in his practical observation, our ancient priest ancestor prophet made use of these forms of knowledge. He did not gain them immediately, but he should have been able to observe, if he kept the records, the seasonal motions over these thousands of years and observe the results in his own life. Way back in this time, a discovery was made. We do not know who made it, when it was made, but it certainly was long before the beginning of the Christian era. And it was probably made in that great philosophical complex of peoples that flourished in the Near East in the valley of the Euphrates from 3,000 to 4,000 years before the beginning of the Christian era. It may have been simultaneously discovered in India and China, for the records are to be found everywhere. And that was that there was another and larger motion that had a very important bearing upon life. And this motion was the precession of the equinoxes. This term, precession of the equinoxes, to one completely unfamiliar with the subject, is just a little difficult to explain briefly. But it means that there is a slow but constant westward motion of the equinoctial points. This motion is exhilarated by a combination of solar-lunar activity and slightly retarded by a reverse planetary activity. As a result of these forces pulling in contrary or inconsistent manners, this precessional motion now means, and has meant as long as man can remember or learn, that each year the sun reaches the equinox slightly sooner than the year before. That actually the coming of the sun is a little over 1 minute earlier each year, making an astronomical degree in about 72 years. Thus, every 72 years, the sun seems to drop back at the equinox 1 degree. If it so does, it drops back approximately 30 degrees every 2,160 years. And it drops back around the entire circle to any hypothetical point in one longer cycle of 25,920 years. In this period of time, the sun seems, only by appearance, seems to drop back around the entire circle of the zodiac, falling backward or failing backward at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. This has been a very important time pattern, and the complete precession of the equinoxes, requiring 25,920 years, is referred to as the Great Platonic Year. Plato was aware of it 300 years or more before the beginning of the Christian era. We know it today. No one has ever been able to shake the phenomenon. We have found new explanations for what caused it, but the fact that it happens is still beyond controversy. And this peculiar heavenly motion has significance in a very wonderful way, and is perhaps the most important link that we have between astronomy and religion in ancient times. The precession of the equinox, therefore, means that every 2,160 years, the sun reaches the equinoctial point in a different sign of the zodiac, each sign constituting 30 degrees. If this occurs, then, we see the appearance of the precession, in which the sun appears to enter each sign in its last degree, and by precession move backward through it to its first degree, and then pass into the next sign, entering that at its last degree and moving back to the first. So this motion appears to be in exact opposition to the rest of the motions of planets and other elements composing the solar family. This peculiar observation, the study of the Platonic year, has led to a great many wonderful symbols and philosophies. To get a further picture of this, we must now move to the story of the sun. I think we all know that it is reported that our very remote forebears were sun worshippers. We know that the Pythagoreans rose at dawn each day to meet with hymn and song the rising of the splendor of the day. We know also that the Hindus worship the sun god under the name of Surya, and honored it, riding in its chariot across the sky. We know that the sun in China was the symbol of imperial heaven, And always the sun, as the great symbol of light, was held with extraordinary veneration. We also know that this experience of the sun was closely related to the agrarian cult, or the belief that religion was an experience of growth in nature. The farmer recognized his indebtedness to the sun. By degrees, men came to realize that only by the sun's power would the grain grow. Only by the power of the sun would light be given so that man could go out and labor. That if he was too long separated from the sun, man himself lost much of his vitality and power. And by degrees, the sun became a God symbol. The all-seeing eye of the ancients, the eye of Horus in Egypt, is actually a symbol of the sun, as is the pupil of the human eye. The sun was regarded as the eye of God, and it is said in the Bible that God made his tabernacle in the sun. All this sun worship was not merely a physical acceptance of the sun as a god. I've talked to a number of followers of very primitive faiths, known to be sun worshippers, and I've asked them if they actually worship the sun. They said, no, we worship or accept the sun as a symbol of a principle in the universe. It is not the visible sun, but light, the sense of consciousness, that light makes all things clear and plain and open. So we remember the Pythagorean definition of God as a being whose body is composed of the substance of light and whose spirit is composed of the substance of truth. Thus the sun was the symbol of the light of the world, the light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. The sun in its daily rising was the symbol of renewed hope. It was the promise of another day of opportunity, of labor, of fulfillment. Ancient man was terribly frightened by an eclipse of the sun because he thought an evil spirit was seeking to destroy the sun. And much of our doctrine of the dragon that ate the sun and other stories and fairy tales come from eclipse phenomena. Also, eclipse phenomena seems to have sustained the belief that there was an adversary or an evil power that wanted to destroy the sun. Man did not fully understand the meaning of the solar power, but he made representations of it in gold. And these were worn by the priests as the symbols of the fact that they served the sun. Most decorations, military or civil, such as the Croix de Guerre or the Légion d'honneur, were originally taken from sun medallions. We reward or honor the individual by bestowing a sun symbol or a rosette upon him. The halos around the heads and bodies of sanctified persons have gradually taken on sun symbolism attributes. These persons were radiant with spiritual powers or with great light within themselves. For the royalty, for the emperor, the king, or the great person, was reserved also the solar coronet. A crown is nothing but a sun, surrounded by a burst of rays. And as time went on, apparently these rays got to be a little inconvenient, sticking out in all directions. So they were turned in to the top, forming the ducal coronet and the crowns of the kings of Europe as we know them today, like the great English crown of St. George. Then among Christian peoples, an orb and a cross were placed upon the top of the crown to symbolize the power of Christendom. And the crown became a radiant throne for the symbol of the Christian mystery itself. The sun, then, has always played this vital part. And we have had sun gods. Every religion has had them. They have always been wonderful, radiant beings, and nearly always they were the direct offspring of deity. They were the highest of the gods. And the tragedies that came to the sun gods were the tragedies that most affected mortals. When Balder the Beautiful, the sun god of the Nordic peoples, was slain by the mistletoe arrow, all the world wept, and darkness descended, and the joy of the gods was destroyed. Apollo was the sun god of the ancient Greco-Latin, Helios, and he is the one who drove his shafts or rays into the body of Python, and caused the great serpent to be killed and thrown into a great ravine in the earth. And later, upon the site of this ravine, and over the corrupting body of Python, was raised the shrine of Delphi. The sun god was always the slayer of evil because he was the overcomer of darkness. He was always the thing that saved men from night. And later, in the place of the sun god itself, came the sun or light symbol, the candle, the torch, the fire. These also dispelled darkness. They were protectors. And the little candle shining in darkness became the symbol of man's hope and of his faith, and later in great diffusion is preserved to us in the illuminations on the Christmas tree. The world tree with its lights is the symbol of all the candles lit from the great power of the sun. In India, there was much philosophy upon the nature of the sun. And we could go into a great deal of abstract thinking relating to their knowledge of astronomy, which was profound, and upon which much of their theology is likewise based. But in round terms, because time is short, and as Hippocrates said, arc is long, we can only make a summary of this situation. But let us accept what is generally demonstrable, namely that upon research we find that ancient man venerated the sun as the visible symbol of an invisible power in space, as the light bearing witness to the life, that there was a life behind the light. Now remember, in the Greek, Helios, later the Latin Apollo, was not regarded as the source of the solar light. He carried on his arm a great shield, and in the center of this shield was a boss or knob. And our modern astronomical symbol for the sun, a dot and a circle, is the shield of Helios, the god. And it was upon the surface of his shield that the sun god reflected the light of space. The ancients did not assume the sun to be the complete source of its own light. They assumed it to be a great focal point in space, which collected the great energies from the field of space and reflected them downward into another condition of space, which we call matter. Therefore, the sun was suspended twixt space and matter, causing the energy of space to permeate all material things. It's an interesting and dramatic concept. And in their ancient arrangement of planets, the sun was placed in the middle orbit, with 3 planets below and 3 above, or rather 2 and the luminary below. Thus the sun was placed in the midst of things. It became an indicating symbol of spirit, of self, later of soul. It was that which represented finally also man, suspended between heaven and earth. It had numerous philosophical meanings, but wherever it appeared, it became an emblem of life and salvation, of redemption. The wonderful Egyptian Pharaoh Akhenaton created the sect or cult of Atonism, which was the worship of the solar globe, the rays ending in human hands, to raise up or to lift all things, because he had already discovered from the wisdom of his people the drawing power of the sun, that the sun raised water, took it into the sky to form clouds. Ancient man watched these things And with his own quiet wisdom, he knew them well. The Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu tells us in absolutely perfect modern terms the entire phenomena of clouds, rainfall, and so on. These things were known, although we have forgotten that our ancestors were so wise. Now the sun deity, having to a great measure become the symbol of life, passed through 3 paralleling cycles of apparently similar activities. These cycles similar in their structure but different in their time equation. By the great precessional motion, the sun seemed to retire around the zodiac in 25,920 years. By another motion, the sun seemed to progress through the signs of the zodiac, and making the complete circle every 12 months, causing what we know as the year. The third cycle of the sun was its apparent motion around the earth, by which it achieved the mystery of the 24-hour day. These were the 3 cycles of the sun, the 3 complete circles which it made of varying magnitude. The least of these cycles in their unity was the day, which consisted of dawn as one of its important points, that in the day the dawn was its vernal equinox. Noon was its summer solstice. Sunset was its autumnal equinox. Midnight was its winter solstice. Thus the sun, according to the Egyptians, rose every morning from the underworld, traveled across the sky, and then at night descended into the land of Amentet, where it shone for all through the night for the souls of the dead in the underworld. Now, some of the old documents give us a peculiar little hint about this. They tell us, for example, one of the old manuscripts, that the people in the underworld...
Prophet, keep an eye on the chat for me. I got to run off for a minute.
In Sicily, where every time the lava flow ceases, the vineyard grower puts his house back in the lava track and then wonders why it is washed away next time. There seems to be no explanation for these things, except man's total inability to learn from experience. If then it is true that there can be a reputable way of foretelling weather, if climate, particularly that part which is related to the vicissitudes of temperature, wind, and the like, can be predicted a year in advance, as the old farmer certainly believed with his almanac, then we are in the presence of a diagnosable state of affairs. A state of affairs which means that the atmospheric world around us is continually changing, and that this constant and consistent atmospheric change may be responsible not only for the flood that washes away our house, but for another kind of flood, like pneumonia, that may attack our living structure. This, again, does not tell us how pneumonia originates, but it does tell us this, that in the atmosphere there may be conditions and times in which atmospheric circumstances contribute more to epidemical disease than at other times. That there are times when perhaps the total atmosphere of the earth, like the human being's personal resistance to infection, may be lowered in resistance factor. It is quite possible that certain vital energies which are needed to purify the earth's atmosphere may not be as abundant at one time as another. Therefore, that the disinfecting or sterilizing power of air may not be as sufficient under certain conditions as it is under other conditions. The French school and the Italian school then approached the problem of sanitation head on and began to combine it with their opinions concerning the atmospheric cause of the prevalence of a certain epidemical ailment. For example, when Nostradamus was made town physician to a small French community, the first thing he tried to do was to get a certain swamp drained. This swamp was a danger, he felt, to the life and health of the people. It was near the edge of the village, and when the wind was right, these fumes came into the town in much in the same way that the old Chicago dweller knows what happens when the wind blows over the stockyards. It was a very unpleasant situation, and he felt a dangerous one. He appealed to the city fathers. He did everything he could, but he found complete indifference, not necessarily because it was believed that the swamp was there by divine right, but that the consequences of it were under divine guidance, and therefore that if you had the epidemic that year, there was nothing you could do about it. It was the will of God. So as Nostradamus points out, when he finally left the community, refusing to be physician there any longer, it was impossible for him to fight the inertia of the people concerning the needs of health. Other communities, however, were somewhat more successful. And the idea gradually generated, based upon Roman, Arabic, and Greek original research, that the time had come, and it is certainly more than due now, to make a very careful study of what might be termed the sterilizing power of air. To the Egyptians and Greeks, the air was another kind of water. Thales declared that the earth was a ship floating on an ocean of air, and that earthquakes were caused by someone rocking the boat. But regardless of this, he would have been the first to declare that it was the air and not the boat, or the so-called water beneath it, that caused the boat to rock. It was not the ship rocking upon a smooth sea. Therefore, what appears to be communicated from the center may be the result of a pressure from the circumference. Studying this matter, the opinion finally came that the atmosphere of the earth is a strange absorbing medium which contains into itself and gradually purifies by its own chemistry, plus the light of the sun, and perhaps the effects of other planets, which may constitute a sterilizing agency, that this atmospheric pollution was gradually dissolved as though it had been breathed out into clear air, like the exhalation of the human breath. That this dissolving of poisons had to go on continuously, because everywhere in nature, from one end to the other, there is life and death. Every moment things are dying and are being gradually destroyed by decay. And from the earth's surface, a continual mass of noxious vapors or fumes constantly arise. And that this mass of residue, this excrement from the planet itself, has to be cleansed by the air. A certain degree of this cleansing is more immediately done by water itself, and our sewage and our refuge generally goes to the sea, and the sea continues to receive it. But constantly the chemistry between the sea and the sun, the raising up of water in a process of perpetual distillation, is again the cleaning agent, according to the observations of our medieval scientists. Thus, everything that is corrupt, everything that is dead, everything that is dangerous to life, must ultimately be cleansed by nature's own processes. Now, at this time, man may be able to take over some part of this, particularly such refuse as belongs to his own kind. But still, if man would solve this problem completely, from the jungle, from the swamp, from the earth's surface everywhere, from the leaves of grass dying on your front lawn, there must forever be death and its processes causing things to be cast into the atmosphere. And this atmosphere then has to become a tremendous sewerage system with its own plan for the transformation of this waste into new and useful living material. The ancients, pondering this thought, decided that they rather liked the idea that this was the explanation to things. It seemed to answer a great many questions. And on this basis, they brought up something a long time ago, which we are just beginning to get around to, namely the possibility that this process going on in the atmosphere of the earth has limitation. That you can go so far with it, and then, if your pollution becomes too great, you pollute your clarifying or cleansing medium itself. Water, by medieval analysis, would take a certain amount of refuse into itself and remain essentially pure. By that we mean that flowing water under light and the various natural circumstances of aeration and so forth could keep the water relatively pure, and that this water could then be used by human life without unusual danger. If, however, the amount of pollution was too great, then the water itself became polluted and was dangerous to human life. The same thing could conceivably happen to the atmosphere, especially when it was put under a strain for which it was not originally intended. Man, in the gradual development and involvement of his own way of life, has created situations which are not natural. And these situations, as they become more and more common, and man's endless ingenuity proceeds to exaggerate the difficulties rather than correcting them, might well result in a pattern perhaps similar to that of our smog disturbance here in Southern California, in which it seems as though by conditions or by circumstances we are unable to keep our air pure. This may be due to local conditions. It may be due, as in this case, principally to a formation within the area, by means of which we are not able to get sufficient atmospheric ventilation. Now, back at the Sorbonne and the Sapienza, early scientists working with this situation long before our modern way of life became as complicated as it is today, made a discovery which perhaps was in the right direction. They pointed out that there were very seldom serious epidemics of disease when there were high winds, but nearly always a serious epidemic breaking out in Europe was preceded by a long calmness of the air, that for several days there would be no wind at all, or very little. And in that time, the area would be more subject to this health problem. Whereas in an epidemic-ridden area, the rise of a strong and prevailing wind often resulted in the diminishing of the ailment. They came, therefore, to the conclusion that due to local conditions or to generally pervading conditions, that wind was an agent of cleansing by creating circulation which carried poisonous materials to remote parts of the atmosphere where they might be more easily destroyed, whereas lack of wind caused these poisons to remain in an area, and that these poisons, continuing to feed the area and not be dissipated, would in turn be re-inhaled into the body of the individual who lived there, creating a vicious circle, reducing resistance, and opening him, quite probably, to the inroad of sickness. Thus, the astrometeorological phase of the problem was partly due to the position of planets and the effect of these upon prevailing wind, whereas the wind itself, it did not seem to make so much difference which way it blew. As long as it was brisk, it would carry these ailments, these elements, break them down into such minute particles that they were not too dangerous, and carry them off into higher atmospheric strata. Also, the problem came as to weight of atmosphere, because it was essential to survival that impurity should rise as far from the surface of the earth as possible, being thereby carried so far into rarefied atmosphere that the sun's power to sterilize would be constantly more available. They then came to the conclusion that where atmosphere became heavy, close to the surface of the earth, and that this heaviness was accompanied by fogs, mist, or long periods of cloudiness, that the sterilizing power of the sun's ray was retarded, and that the ability of the sun to purify was thereby delayed or reduced, perhaps almost imperceptibly, but enough in the pattern of life to cause the derangement which made the continuance of the ailment possible. Now, in some ailments, such as, for example, cholera, we come to another interesting thing. Researchers in an early time report, among other things, a European on a ship sailing in one of the tropical seas. He actually claims that he and other members of the ship's crew, in fact the whole crew, actually saw a cholera cloud. And in Asiatic people, we find frequent references to this. And in some countries, as a danger warning against this epidemic, a piece of raw meat is suspended somewhere out of doors. If the cholera comes into the area, this raw meat immediately putrefies in a peculiar way. That something, therefore, is carried. That this epidemic has been pronounced visible as a kind of a miasma, or a kind of a fog-like situation, which either carries it or is essential to its presence in a particular area. This opens another field of possible thinking, whether perhaps we are dealing with a broad kind of atmospheric phenomena, and that these epidemics actually result from pollution, total pollution of nature, moving back upon the earth again, turned by certain type of atmospheric barrier, due in turn to some form of planetary activity. The answer would be planetary if it can be proven that the Farmer's Almanac is correct. And we have no proof that it is not. Certainly it is something worth considering. Now, presuming for a moment that there is some truth in this, we can then turn to research that has been done in the field of astrological thinking over a period of probably 3,000 or more years. For early in the beginnings of this art, it was strongly divided into what were called genelithaical astrology, or nativities of persons, and mundane astrology, which had to do with all the problems of the world, particularly problems involving nations, national relationships, health, weather, climate, and so forth. The old shipmaster would not go to sea without a study of the motions of planets, which would be likely to be effective during his voyage. And when we realize the type of ship he sailed in, and the long and hazardous journeys that he made, and the remarkable number of times in which he returned, it is evident that he must have had some rather greater skill than we have, for we would hesitate to make a small lake journey on a boat with which he was forced to go around the world. Therefore, his skill and his intimate knowledge of nature were his saving graces in most cases. If then there is such a problem, what seems to produce it? So, a number of instances, probably 400 or 500 cases of plague. Not cases involving individuals, but cases involving the date of the return of great epidemical diseases, the seasonal returns of children's diseases, and all of these things have been examined, broken down, and analyzed. Now we know, for example, that up to very recently, we were without the knowledge of 3 planets that we have since found and added to the solar family. Therefore, many of the earlier researches have to be revised in terms of the knowledge of Uranus, Neptune, and now Pluto. But even without these, the ancient was remarkably able to announce and foretell the advent of plagues and of various sicknesses, and also of determining the critical period of sickness in the life of an individual who was stricken. He was very capable of using this knowledge in diagnosis, and his patients survived in some miraculous manner, perhaps almost as well, if not entirely as well, as many of those of today. Out of this thinking, the ancient came to the opinion that Saturn and Mars had a particular relationship to epidemical disease, that these two constituted the ancient killers, and that Jupiter became involved to the degree that he represented mass, multitude, number. Whatever happened under the influence of Jupiter became increasingly expansive and had a large area or theater of action. Therefore, if Saturn and Mars were in evil association with each other, and Jupiter became involved in this pattern, something of an epidemical or grand nature might be regarded as likely. Now these same calculations have been revised with the addition of Uranus and Neptune. As up to now, not much has been done in such detail with the recent planet Lowell Pluto. But the other two have been considered, and they are found to combine very strongly with Mars and Saturn, so that we have 4 great planetary masses: Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Mars. And all of these have a very definite bearing upon certain periodic recurrences in atmospheric conditions. Now, the relationships of these two atmospheres must also be regarded as adding other factors to the pattern. And the old astrologer, looking into this, came to the conclusion that man is subject to many epidemical ailments other than those which can be physically diagnosed. that just as surely as he can have the whooping cough or the measles, so he can have a series of humors, or he can develop attitudes. The ancients did not have our modern psychological terminology, but what they are telling us is that various attitudes, individual and collective, can be due to these things. And that such an attitude, as we will say, as a recession, which we are beginning to speculate on at the moment, can also be due to great numbers of persons under certain debility of vitality. And that wherever individuals lose a certain measure of energy, they begin to think negatively. And whatever problem is besetting them at the moment, the problem becomes bigger as they feel less well. Whereas healthy persons, by nature optimistic, will attack a problem. Less healthy persons, not so optimistic, will permit the problem to attack them, and as a result come into serious trouble. Also, that under certain types of energy, particularly the energy of Uranus, individuals function under extraordinary tension. That instead of doing things in a relaxed and natural manner, they become stress-ridden. That it seems as though some kind of an irritating electrical current was coursing through them, which will never let them rest, will never let them do anything in an easy manner. And even when they have nothing to do particularly, still they cannot let down. They are under this constant urge. And our ancient brethren were of the opinion that this urge is due to certain electrical currents, and that humanity divides into several groups. One group is composed of persons comparatively immune to this urge because it does not have chemical or psychochemical affinity to them. This urge can move through a group of persons, but there are always some who will not respond because their own polarities will not respond. The individuality of the person is sufficiently strong to prevent response. The magnetic field of the individual does not chemically react to the magnetic influences in the same way because of a different basic polarization. Like the case of a radio that is turned on to a certain station, other programs will not be received by that adjustment. And the individual, having a certain adjustment, tunes in certain things. And in that way, those listening to that program will be affected by it. Others will not, perhaps except indirectly. So this pressure moving through space will, however, catch on to a great number of persons, producing a sufficient response to upset an economic situation or to drive a highly tense people into a state of war. It can mean that under this pressure, certain vitalities are inhibited, certain judgment is reduced, irritation is increased, and a group of persons who might otherwise be quiet and law-abiding citizens suddenly become a mass of irritated individuals. And with irritation present, there is always something that we can find to be an object for that irritation. And this in turn can result in marked rises in death rates, marked lowering of birth rate, marked increase in divorce, marked increase in crime, marked increase in alcoholism, and all of the various escape mechanisms which become operative under the pressure of a general situation. Now, whether the individual is going to react or not, and the degree of his reaction may be determined by his own nature. And the older people believed that therefore, if it was not adjusted to him by his own nature, the effect would not be felt. Therefore, his own stars had to be examined also to determine whether he was sensitive to this condition. But that there would be enough persons sensitive to a broad situation, that by its stimulation, world patterns could change, world situations could change, and therefore that to a measure world health would be affected. The ancient was fully aware that there had to be a sound mind in a sound body in order for health to follow. If the body was corrupted, it was a disaster. If the mind in the body was corrupted, it was a greater disaster. But that you are either healthy or you are sick. And that where you are sick, the sickness is either due to your attitude or to conditions affecting your body.
Well,
that your attitude may also affect your body. But the body, being composed of material elements, was also under the domination of certain material forces operating constantly in the universe. Thus a philosophy was gradually developed, integrated and pointed. And from this philosophy, a number of rather interesting and relevant points can be gathered. One of these, perhaps the most general one, is paralleling the idea that Plato had, that the world itself was subject to alternate periods of fertility and sterility. We know that throughout history, world activities and events break into patterns, that these patterns are bounded by years, that one generation is given to arts and another to sciences, that at one time man develops tremendous ingenuity in music, and in another time, as now, he is immersed in electronics. Different eras, different patterns seem to lead, direct his interest, and through this leadership affect his world. Man, by nature an extremist, however, nearly always gets into trouble with his own inventions. He is unable to be mocked.
That's what I be trying to tell people. When they be always talking about how they feel or they sick and just, I told they be speaking that stuff on themselves. I mean, don't nobody feel good all the time, but if you just dwell on it, just think about it all the time, it's gonna really make you feel worse.
And he is not sufficiently broad in his understanding to consider the secondary consequences of the things he does. He feels that he will accomplish a certain thing, but he does not know how to get away from the inevitable negative misuse of that which he accomplishes. So every blessing has a curse within it, and every curse may be a blessing in disguise. These things are polarized. And the individual, creating a new life pattern, brings himself inevitably under both the positive and negative aspects of that pattern. The positive aspects are progress, and for the most part, the negative aspects are sickness. Under the existing world shape of things now, we perceive a strong increase in epidemical disease. We observe a strong increase in that great disease, tension. We are using every means possible to fight this tension ailment. And we are going back to Hippocrates, who insisted that the intensities of man afflicted his flesh, and that he cannot live badly inside and have a healthy external life. Now, when you start to work with people, however, who have these intensities, you come upon a very interesting thing that is as mysterious as weather. And that mystery is their own climate. The individual, for the most part, lives in a kind of way of life that no matter how unsatisfactory it may be, he loves it devoutly. No matter how much misery it has caused him, he has little, if any, inclination to change. Always he is confronted with a twofold path, what he should do and what he wants to do. And in 99 cases out of 100, he will assume that what he wants to do is inevitable, and therefore that there is no use resisting in any way. Even the thought of resistance begins to convey the impulse of arduous effort, and that in itself is paralyzing. Man with a tremendous capacity to work hard doing nothing can find little, if any, energy to work slightly doing something. He considers all self-improvement labor, whereas the performance of those things that make him sick, this is a real joy, a real self-expression. He also feels that he is a human being with an inalienable right to do what he pleases, even though the result pleases no one. It is this strange apathy which leaves the person with no probability of reform except some kind of a change in his own climate. He has to have a different degree of humidity in order to combat the degree of stupidity with which he is afflicted. And this change, when it does come, is like the departure of an epidemic. No one seems to know why it goes any more than why it came. The individual will occasionally wake up in the morning and decide to live a different kind of life and go and do it. But you cannot directly trace this in the majority of instances to anyone's influence on him. Perhaps he has been collectively exposed to something and has come to like it. But why? One morning he gets up and does it, no one seems to know. Why another person in an equally difficult situation will never do anything about it is also equally a mystery of life. Out of this situation, however, that no one really wishes to curb himself, limit his own pleasures, or protect the common good at his own expense. This is the kind of a talk that we approach prayerfully, because it is not my purpose or desire that it shall develop into a political discussion. I do not believe that we should use an occasion of this kind to either defend or condemn a person in public life. What we really want to try to do, if we possibly can, is to distinguish the person himself, separate him to a degree from his public office, and try to understand him.
This here is about the late John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy. This is Manly P. Hall. This is a lecture he did. I never listened to this one all the way through. I think this is going to be very interesting. This is everything that I be telling y'all about your charts, about your birth chart and everything, about what's in the stars, as we say. This lecture is called Kennedy and His Stars.
A little bit as a human being. Of course, this is difficult.
And Astro, let me see here. Kennedy and His Stars. Kennedy and His Stars, an astro-theological study of the man and his job, is an unusual lecture by Manly P. Hall and has historic significance. Delivered just weeks before JFK's tragic death on October 27, 1963, Hall uses the president's astrological chart to get a better understanding of the person and the position he held at the time. Hall then goes on to make some interesting points about the long view of the presidency, the mystical foundations of the United States, and her destiny and world going into the future.
A person becomes so intimately involved in political situations. In politics, there's a great deal of hysteria and a tremendous amount of pressure. And partisanships always run high. At the same time, somewhere under the surface of all this confusion is a human being who has what may well be described as the most difficult job on earth. That any human being shall be fully adequate to such a job, particularly under existing conditions, can hardly be expected. Actually, in this country, we have never prepared people for this type of responsibility. We hope that a reasonable degree of public experience will fit them for leadership. I've always held, will continue to do so, that the education of the American people should fit more persons for leadership. And that when it becomes obvious that an individual is going to make a political or diplomatic career, that he should have a great deal of special training. This is not available, so we cannot expect that which we have not provided for. The second point that I believe we all have to face and recognize in this country, that by the very structure of our national government, it can hardly be assumed that any individual can assume power beyond a certain point without the cry of dictatorship arising. It is almost impossible for anyone to please everyone. And if he succeeded in doing so, he certainly wouldn't please himself. All these elements and situations bear upon all high public office. And of course, the presidency is the highest of these offices. The next point we have to bear in mind is that for the last 50 years, this country and most of the civilized world has been drifting toward a very critical situation. Every day, old causes produce their effects. It is unfair and unreasonable to assume that situations begin and end even in the lifetime of a human being. Situations such as those now prevailing in this country certainly do not begin and end within any administration of public office. We are now living out conditions that began even before the Revolutionary War. We are certainly confronted today with problems that were left unsolved with the Civil War. All these different old streams of condition have a tendency to flow along, sometimes running parallel with each other, occasionally crisscrossing and creating crisis. Also, within the last 15 or 20 years particularly, the American people have lost much of their ability to face crisis. The development of thermonuclear fission has confused, disturbed, and deeply troubled the peoples of the world's principal nations. We are no longer able to approach the problems of government with a reasonable degree of personal integration. We are neurotic. And nearly all neurotic peoples become increasingly suspicious They are quick to condemn and slow to praise anything. And yet in the emergencies which arise, their united support can hardly be expected. Thus we have a time in which problems are heaping up very rapidly, and the public ability to digest or accept problems grows less every day. We also have pressures from outside of our own way of life, the continually boring and difficult international phase of things, with communistic and socialized states determined to overthrow the surviving democratic institutions. Into such a position as this, nearly anyone would find himself rather reluctant to take on these responsibilities. Therefore, one of the first things we have to find in leadership is an individual who is not reluctant. Time after time, we know that public office has come to those who were perhaps not especially well fitted for it, simply because those better fitted refused to accept it. Today, we feel that public office is practically a condemnation. That we will lose our friends, multiply our enemies, ruin our reputations, and probably shorten our lives. Only certain types of individuals, therefore, can be expected to have any interest in such liabilities. They must either be extremely dedicated, or they must have a kind of optimism which stands for a measure of unknowing. They cannot fully face the facts and at the same time maintain very much optimism or confidence. In recent elections, we have produced a variety of leaders. Some have been reasonably strong, some have not been so able, but they have all shared together both applause and criticism. And now, fate, this mysterious force that operates in a million ways to influence our destinies, has turned the administration of our affairs into the keeping of John Kennedy. Just what this means, perhaps only very few philosophically inclined persons can estimate. We will know much more about it when history unfolds the pattern, after the various personalities have ceased to dominate the public scene. So we want to begin by attempting to understand a little bit the basic temperament of President Kennedy. According to the best reports that we are able to secure, he was born at Brookline, Massachusetts on May 29th, 1917 at 3 p.m. Other hours are given, but this apparently is the hour that is sustained by the family records. This tells us something about our man from a natal chart erected for the time of birth. Now, as I've always pointed out, among the many things we have neglected is this study of the effect of the planets upon human beings. Whereas we have advanced other subjects with surprising progressiveness, we have left this area almost totally neglected, except for a few sincere individuals who have done the best they could with practically no support and a great deal of criticism. Therefore, we cannot say that the subject itself has been brought to the highest possible scientific perfection. We realize that we are using interpretations that were devised and given to the world nearly 5,000 years ago. For the most part, these interpretations appear to be effective.
but we do not advance them dogmatically. We only advance them suggestively, in the sense that we hope they will add something to our general understanding of the subject. We learn, therefore, from the chart of Mr. Kennedy that he has his sun, or the luminary, in the early degrees of Gemini. Now, what does Gemini tell us about the personality and characteristics of Mr. Kennedy? Of course, he is one of a vast family, inasmuch as all the world is full of people born under the sign of Gemini. There are countless individuals in numerous walks of life, some famous, some unknown, who have this particular sun position. Consequently, it can only be indicative. On the other hand, the average Gemini is not challenged as he has been. He is not required to plumb the very depths of his resources and to apply every phase of his thinking to some urgent problem. Therefore, under pressure, the Gemini may react somewhat differently from the normal expectancies. First of all, we know that this is largely or dominantly a nervous intellectual sign. It means that our man was born with what we might term a mental temperament. He was born to work out certain problems by the use of mental faculties. Now, the one advantage of Gemini is its tremendous power to explore details. The disadvantage is that it is likely to become drowned in detail. The individual will perhaps make too much of small matters and overlook greater things. Also, there will be a continuing tendency to analysis. There will be as much thoughtfulness and ingenuity as the planet Mercury normally bestows. But in general, the Gemini individual has difficulties with what you might term the higher aspects of mentation. He has difficulty in being a philosopher. He has difficulty in maintaining a concept of great universal principles operating in the world. Now, we do not know to what degree Mr. Kennedy may have, through his personal efforts, improved his horizons in these respects. But we are always aware of the basic danger of Gemini losing sight of the great trends of things, the great patterns of life, losing sight of the long-range operations of such laws as cause and effect. We do not know with certainty, for example, to what degree Mr. Kennedy is philosophically inclined. We do not know to what degree he has enlarged his perspective from what might be termed the intellectual pursuits of the average man into the contemplative pursuits of those who are really well qualified for leadership in a confused world. If we want to ask ourselves a simple question, it may not be amiss. Considering the state of society, considering the state of education at the time that President Kennedy was educated, considering the type of education that the average person receives today under the name of higher education, what would be the probabilities of Mr. Kennedy or anybody else coming out of this system with a deep and abiding philosophic insight? I think we can say the probabilities are extremely small. Therefore, whatever philosophy or insight a man has must usually be developed by himself from his own experiences in life. Experiences in life also are subject to numerous modifications. The greatest modification in the case of Mr. Kennedy appears to have been his own family. This modification took the form of having been raised in a comparative economic security, having been raised with a high sense of the value of wealth, the value of social position. Here we have a man to whom many of the common emergencies of his own people could only be known or understood by philosophic insight. He did not share them. But this does not necessarily mean that he could not understand them. But it does mean that in order to understand them, he would have to try. He would have to work very definitely to become better acquainted with the conditions of the great body of people with whom he is associated. Mercury, as ruler of the chart, does not naturally imply this. Ruler of the sun sign, pardon me, does not naturally imply this. It implies rather the gradual building up of personal attitudes on these things, in which personal conditioning plays a very large part in the dimensions of temperament. It therefore would be natural to assume from the position here indicated that he would build a more or less personal point of view largely upon personal experience. This has certain limitations, but of course we must not forget that this is not all of the chart. Therefore, we can only say that this tendency would be, to briefly summarize the Gemini-Mercury situation, the tendency would be to assume that he has an intellectual approach toward life, that this approach is somewhat critical and analytical, somewhat suspicious, and to a measure limited. That furthermore, his thinking would be based largely upon his own experience, which is true of all of us, but in his case, this personal experience becomes a factor in national existence rather than merely a factor in personal existence, which is so often otherwise the case. According to the ascending sign, which is Libra, Mr. Kennedy has the characteristics and attributes which undoubtedly endeared him to a considerable part of the public and contributed to his election. In other words, Libra bestows upon a person a certain magnetic radiance, a certain personality of charm, of forthrightness, and to a measure of perpetual youth. The individual gives the strong impression of being like other people, pleasant, affable, sympathetic, and attractive. All of these elements have certainly contributed a great deal to Mr. Kennedy's position, and they also sustained him rather powerfully through the opening months or year of his presidency. This personal charm problem, however, in the case of Libra, has other factors related to it. Research in the general theory of character analysis and comparison with other charts shows that Libra has locked inside of it very powerful personal ambitions. These ambitions are not necessarily selfish. They are not necessarily evil, but they certainly represent a powerful drive of libido. They represent a continuing determination to rise in the world. And by the nature of the sign itself, which though artistic is strangely political, this sign very often drives individuals into public office. They have many of the qualifications and aspects which make for a successful public person. One of the things which they bestow is a natural sense of personal rightness. The individual under Leiber is quite convinced by some power within his own nature that he has a point of view that is important. We can find, for instance, strong Leiber characteristics diversified between individuals as completely different as Adolf Hitler and Mohandas Gandhi. Therefore, we cannot literally say that the Leiber drive leads inevitably to the dictatorial attitudes of Hitler, for we find this same dictatorial drive, so-called, leading to the dynamic humility of Gandhi. But between both of these men, there was one point of common agreement, namely that both felt profoundly that there was a job to be done. Each did it in his own way. One is remembered with extraordinary bitterness, and the other with a great deal of compassion and respect. But behind the Leiber person is this sense, almost always, of some kind of a separate destiny. The Leiber individual is not really willing to settle down into the common mold of things and be just one with other people. He feels that his own points of view are unusually valuable. He is willing quickly to defend the principles or concepts which he holds to be useful or proper. Yet in this Leiber individual there is also a conflict which we find in most leadership, a conflict between a desire to accomplish a great good and the tremendous pressures which arise from the constant blocking or obstructing of personal ambition. Nearly all Leiber individuals have a long, hard fight of it, whichever way it goes. And in this fight, they develop very often a tendency to greater and greater defense of these pressures or convictions which they themselves hold. I would say, therefore, that in a political situation, a Leiber person is apt to be acceptable from the standpoint of personality, but it will always be difficult to determine the full pressure of the drive behind them. It is hard to know which direction they will turn, whether they will become disillusioned and embittered, and therefore turn their drive into a negative channel, or whether they will remain optimistic or creative to the end and use this drive as Gandhi did for the emancipation of his people. This parallel is of interest also because it involves the sense, very largely the sense of justice. Leiber representing a sign of justice. The individual has a strong concept of what justice is. But this sense of justice can be, and often is, highly colored or conditioned by personal tastes. Leiber being a combination of justice and emotion, we have a somewhat conflicting or contradictory state of affairs. Usually we think of justice blindfolded, holding the scales in balance. Unfortunately, the Leiber person is not blindfolded. He is not only placed in a position where justice is important, but he is also moved by personal considerations. He is moved by feelings. He is moved by emotions. Therefore, out of these emotions and feelings, his code of justice will largely be molded. And this molding will result in a more personal sense of executive leadership than you find in some other signs. There is a strong ambition drive in our man. This ambition drive was present, or he would never have achieved the presidency. This ambition drive continues, and I suspect that it will take the form in his administration of a very dedicated determination to do those things which he believes to be necessary, things which to his understanding a combination of criticism and sentimentalism he feels to be most necessary. I don't think we have any right to assume in him any more than in anyone else that he is going to be entirely separate from himself. He is not suddenly going to be someone else. He is not going to be submerged in ideas and attitudes which are foreign to his own nature. Therefore, we might say that he is as a person tossed into the ocean. He is determined to swim ashore according to his own convictions. He is not going to allow himself to be drowned in an ocean of other people's opinions. This is part of the Liber temperament. It is its strength, and if this strength becomes unreasonable, it is its stubbornness. But in any event, it represents to
We come here to learn. We're here for a pursuit of knowledge. We have an emotional connection to everybody in this room. We're here for a reason. Today you're going to learn. Listen to
the three jewels of Buddhism.
Something's trying to get our attention, trying to tell us something.
The Hindu Trimurti.
We see it going back very, very far into the earliest aspects of human history.
And the Holy Trinity of Christianity.
The number represents a portal, a gateway into another realm.
Throughout human history, the number 3 has always had a unique significance. But why?
No matter what ancient culture you look at, the highest ones always came as 3s.
What is it about the number 3 that makes it play such a big role in religion, architecture, and even the occult? And could there be an extraterrestrial connection?
Once we understand this power of 3, we ourselves will become like our creators, the gods.
Millions of people around the world believe we have been visited in the past by extraterrestrial beings. What if it were true? Did ancient aliens really help to shape our history? And if so, might the secrets of the universe be revealed by examining the incredible power of 3?
You know it. You know I do the remix. Yeah, let's go here.
This is the epic story of our world. But it's not the one we're used to.
I be trying to find us some real good shit to hear.
It's the story of how we almost didn't happen. We turn back time 4.5 billion years to our solar system, still forming around the sun.
Everything always go back to the solar system.
This planet is early Earth. It's at a critical distance from the sun. It is in this zone that liquid water will be able to exist. Any closer, and our future cities would burn and our oceans boil. Any further out, and our future freezes over. Earth's location is just one of many lucky breaks. The next comes in the form of cosmic disaster. A massive object, the size of Mars, collides into early Earth. If the collision were head-on, our planet would have shattered. Instead, the debris forms our moon. The moon is a counterbalance, stabilizing Earth's rotation, which will prevent catastrophic swings in climate.
I can't wait to hear what you got to say,
Another
Prophet.
lucky break.
Everything got to be by luck, they say.
As Earth cools, the heaviest metals sink and form a spinning core. Sending a giant invisible force field around the planet. A magnetic field that will one day protect us from deadly radiation and keep our atmosphere from blowing away. But since most heavy metals sank to the core, Earth's surface is devoid of the vital materials, the iron, tin, lead, and gold that we will one day need. That is, until Jupiter and Saturn step in to help. Millions of miles away, these massive planets shift in their orbits, sending billions of metal-rich asteroids through space, showering Earth and replenishing our supply. Then, another lucky break. Jupiter's orbit stabilizes, and its massive gravity begins to vacuum up most of the remaining rocks, keeping our future home safe. Without a giant neighbor like Jupiter, Earth would still be under constant asteroid attack. If just a single one of these things had not happened in precisely the right way, our story would unfold differently, or not begin at all. Earth would not have the minerals and metals, the stability, the seasons, to support the amazing saga that is to come. In this special presentation, we'll see that everything is connected.
You can't look at this as tiny little remote events, that these are huge coupled aspects, events that themselves are part.
Hi Capricorn, this is Wendy from Wendy's Tarot. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be doing a freestyle reading, taking a look at the current energies between you and your person, whoever it is that you are connecting to and dealing with in love. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Just as a reminder, these are general readings. They might not resonate for everyone, but if it resonates for you, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. Keep in mind, roles can be reversed sometimes in these readings, and also my readings are for Sun, Moon, Rising, and Venus signs. One more thing for all the new subscribers that have joined my channel, please be aware of scammers that are out there pretending to be me. I will never send you a message telling you to contact me in any way, so please be careful not to get scammed. All right, Capricorn, so let's take a look at what are your person's current feelings for you. Let's see. All right, Spirit, what are this person's current feelings for Capricorn? Thank you, Spirit. At the bottom of the deck, we have the Sun card, could be a Leo you're dealing with. We also have the Emperor and Aries. We have the Page of Pentacles and the Eight of Wands. Cancer, no, not Cancer. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, some of you might be dealing with. So in regards to this person's current feelings for you, Capricorn, this person is holding back from communicating with you. They really want to, though. Oh, it looks like they want to apologize to you also about something. They do. Yeah, this person wants to communicate some sort of apology to you here. But their ego and their pride is holding them back, I feel, with the Emperor. They don't want to look weak or vulnerable. But I do feel like an energy of guilt. I don't know what, guilty about what, I'm not sure. But I feel with the Sun card, for some of you, this person took you for granted, is what I'm getting. Yeah, I feel like this is how they're looking at you. They're looking at you as the sun. You know, they're looking at you as something that, as someone who was very beneficial to them in some way. Yeah, someone who was very beneficial to them in some way. Like they're admiring you, you know, they're respecting you. Or they feel admiration, they feel respect for you. Even if they don't show it or demonstrate it, I do see that they feel that way. Like they feel like you brought something good into their life. You might have helped this person without realizing it, you know? That's what I'm getting here. And I feel like this person cares a lot more about you than you think. Or they care about you a lot more than you think they do. Because, you know, the Emperor sometimes is like, the Emperor doesn't really express emotion. The Emperor can seem kind of cold and detached, you know, many times, usually. So I feel like this person definitely cares about you and, you know, has feelings for you a lot more than you think. I feel like they feel a lot of passion for you. They're very attracted to you. I feel like they were playing a game though with you, like in the beginning. In the beginning of the connection, I feel like they were playing a little bit of a game with you. I feel like this person was also trying to intimidate you, but it didn't work. It didn't work. They tried to intimidate you, but it didn't work. Or like they tried to like assert their dominance over you, but it didn't work. That's why they respect you with the Sun card. Yeah, that's why they respect you. Because I feel like you didn't allow this person to control you. And I feel like this person is used to controlling, everything in their life. And I feel like they tried to control you as well. But I feel like you didn't allow yourself to be controlled by them, and it caused them to feel respect for you. It caused them to see you in a different way. It changed their view of you, their perspective of you. And I feel like in the beginning they took you for granted because they thought you were like everyone else. They thought you were just like any other person. But I feel like they quickly learned that you're not like everybody else. You're somebody who stands out with the Sun card. You're not like anyone they've met before, basically. And I see them wanting to connect with you with the Eight of Wands and communicate with you. But I also see them holding back here. Why is this person holding back, Spirit? Let me take a look at that. I'll keep the Sun card here. Why is this person holding back from Capricorn? Okay. High Priestess and the Two of Wands is showing up here. Might be connecting to a Pisces. I feel like with the High Priestess, I feel like you represent something that is very unknown to them. Like you are kind of like an unknown territory type of energy. There's some sort of mystery that surrounds you. According to them, in their eyes. It's like you represent something that's new and that's different. And they feel intimidated. Perhaps for the first time in their life, they feel intimidated. Because I don't feel like the Emperor usually feels intimidated by anything or anyone. Yeah, so with the Two of Wands here, this is like, it's kind of like an Ace of Wands energy. Like, it's like the start of something brand new. They see the opportunity with you. They see the potential with you. But I feel like they're a little bit scared because it's like it's out of their comfort zone. It's out of the box, or it's it's unconventional for them in some way. It's unconventional to their personal routine and structure. But they are very like intrigued by you, and I feel like this person can't stop thinking about you and dreaming of you. The high priestess can be like a dream energy or fantasy energy. This person, I feel like, might be self-sabotaging the relationship here. Yeah. It's a possibility that this person self-sabotages the relationship, because I see they have a lot of insecurity. It's like you make this person feel insecure, because the emperor is usually very confident, but it's like with you, they feel insecure, you know? If that makes sense. Okay. What was I asking? Jeez, I forgot. Oh, why were they holding back? All right. So let's take a look at how does this person see you? Let's take a deeper look at what is this person's view or perspective or perception of you. Please show me that, Spirit. Thank you so much. I want to take these cards again. All right, in regards to how they see you, sorry. In regards to how they see you, we have 6 of Cups at the bottom of the deck. We also have 7 of Wands, the Judgment card, and the 2 of Wands. Which came out again. Okay. So we do have the 7 of Wands here, so they might be seeing you as somebody who has blocked them, or who is blocking them, or who's pushing them away, or like someone who's creating distance between you and them. But they're also looking at you as someone who is stuck between 2 options here with the 2 of Wands. And they're looking at you as someone who has to make a decision here with the Judgment card. Six of Cups, sorry, Knight of Swords, Temperance. Okay, so it's almost like the ball is in your court, basically, Capricorn. That's how this person is looking at you. They're looking at you as the ball is in your court. Like, they're looking at you as you have the upper hand here. You have the upper hand. In your hands is lies the fate of this relationship. The Judgment is kind of like an energy of fate. So it's like in your hands lies the fate of this relationship. That's how they see you. They're at your mercy. Yeah, they're at your mercy because I feel like they're looking at you like you're upset with them with the 7 of Wands. Yeah, And I can see they feel guilty here. So this person sees you as someone who feels offended or who feels disrespected or who just feels upset by something that they did or by something that they said or some sort of behavior that they had with you, Capricorn. Yeah, they feel like you're upset with them because of how they behaved with you or something they said to you or something they did to you or with you. And they feel like it's up to you to decide whether you're going to forgive them or not. So that's what that's what this Two of Wands is. That's what you're stuck between. You're stuck between forgiving them or not forgiving them, or like, giving them a second chance or not giving them a second chance. That's how they're seeing you. They're seeing you as someone who has to make a decision regarding that. And like I said, they feel like you have the upper hand, the ball is in your court, and the fate of the relationship between you and them is in your hands. Alrighty, what else? Let's take a look at what are their true desires in regards to you and intentions, their true desires and intentions in regards to you, Capricorn. Let's see. Spirit, what are this person's true desires and intentions with Capricorn? Please show me. Thank you.
Hey, Sagittarius. So
At the bottom of the deck, we do have the Five of Cups. Oh, I don't like this. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about this. Five of Cups. We have the Hierophant here. We have the Seven of Swords. And we have the Ten of Swords. So, it's like, I feel like this person wants to make things right with you, Capricorn. With the Hierophant card, I feel like they do want to make things right. I feel like they want to, how do you say, absolve themselves of their own guilt, liberate themselves from their own guilt. Yeah, because we do have the Emperor here. The Emperor, tends to be all about themselves. So it's like, I feel like, yeah, they do want to make things right with you, but I feel like
What's going on, Capricorns? We're going to go ahead and jump into your January 2023 monthly reading here. And we're going to take a look and see what is going on with y'all for the new year. Happy New Year's to y'all. Happy birthday to y'all. Keep in mind, these are general readings. Feel free to check your other placements. I always recommend checking your sun, moon, rising, and your Venus sign. If I talk about the astrology, it'll be from sun sign and rising sign perspective. So with that being said, let's see, Capricorns. What's going on with you? I was getting for some of you, Neptune came flying out this deck, and also the Ascendant came out. And for whatever reason, vision board came to my head. So some of you could be creating a vision board, something like that. So let's see. And I was also hearing January 23rd, because I kept saying January 2023 instead of January 2023. So it could be a significance around that date for some of you. All right. All right. What's going on, Capricorns? Overall energy, the Three of Cups. Capricorn partying this month. Ain't that right, Capricorn? Work hard, play hard, right, Capricorn? King of Pentacles is your current energy. Five of Swords is your challenge. Near future is the Eight of Wands. I feel like a lot of you guys are actually putting the focus on yourself right now. I mean, King of Pentacles is your energy. I just feel like this is you coming out. I mean, we do still have a stellium going in Capricorn, with the sun being in your sign, because it's, it's y'all's birthday season. With Venus and Mercury being there as well. So a lot of your energy is work oriented with that King of Pentacles, focusing on your stability and work. I do feel like your work's going to be paying off too, because the Three of Cups is the overall energy here for you for the month. And Three of Cups does represent celebrations. Also, like whenever it is that it's like a good job, or it's just like you being able to enjoy like your success with other people. So I like it. Five of Swords is in your challenge. I'm kind of getting here that a lot of you, like I said, I feel like you could just be really focused on work. Some of you guys are just like, I don't have time for people right now. I'm doing my own thing. And that may sort of be the challenge. So I feel like it's like telling or wanting you to be aware, like, to take in, don't neglect everybody, Capricorn. I just feel like this is letting you know. Some of you, it's just like people. You just don't want to be bothered right now until it's like you're done doing whatever it is that you're doing, or maybe because you have a lot of responsibilities here. So Eight of Wands is in your near future position of the month. So Eight of Wands is the power of ambition, or the height of ambition. And I get that this is you climbing a new mountain, Capricorn, with the Eight of Wands. Also feel like there's going to be quick success. I like swift movement here as well. This card is also a card of growth and expansion. So you see a lot of growth, especially if you've been working hard. The position of something that you're unaware of is the Ten of Pentacles here. Queen of Cups is how you get to your challenge. I knew it. I know what's going on here. And you have the Ten of Cups here in your outcome. Ooh, I like this outcome. Whatever it is that you're working toward, I will feel like it'll be ending at good completion here with the Ten of Cups. It's going to make you happy. I love the Ten of Cups in the outcome position. So keep doing what it is that you're doing here. I feel like you'll be able to enjoy all the work that you've been doing, or what it is that you've been focusing your attention onto right now. Like I said, I feel like with the Queen of Cups, it is wanting you to have like an intuitive and emotional sort of understanding of other people. I don't know why it's coming through, but it just is, to keep in mind of other people's needs and not to neglect your own needs here as well. Like to make sure that you're focusing on your own well-being. Capricorn, you guys are headstrong goats on land and sea. People forget about that, and the sea, mystical sea goat. And you guys work really hard. You guys are very critical and tenacious, and like critical in a good way. Very hardworking when it comes to your goals and things that you want to achieve. And sometimes you can lack a sense of taking into mind how it affects other people, or how the hard work even affects your own well-being. So I feel like it's wanting you to be aware of that. Ten of Pentacles in the position of something that you're unaware of. Again, you have two tens here, which is just telling me, and it's corresponding to one another, that you're building a lot of stability at this time. Also, Ten of Pentacles is a card of organization. I feel like it's wanting you to stay as organized as possibly as you can. Make sure that you're re-looking over things. I know we're going through a Mercury retrograde right now. And so I feel like it's wanting you to pay attention, make sure you're double clarifying things, especially with it being in your sign here. Also, the Ten of Pentacles can relate to family as well. Anything in regards to family. And that if you're searching for answers in particular things, I feel like you could find the answers to maybe somebody you know in your family. Like they could give you some type of advice, or they could help you, or there's something like that here in this reading. We haven't even clarified yet. Ninth house exploration here. You could even be traveling here in the near future with the Eight of Wands. You could be exploring, sort of outside of your immediate environment, or what it is that you're used to, which can relate to travel and just exploring in general. I feel like a lot of you, though, as well, is like you're starting to open yourself up to newer goals, like I said, because if you think about the ninth house as long journeys, the start of long journeys here, which can be like long goals that we have. Because reaching that would be the 10th house in the midhaven, which is the pinnacle of, and how your success comes out. But that's what I'm getting here with this ninth house. So I feel like it's wanting you to explore things. What is going on in your ninth house? Virgo is your ninth house. I think nothing's really going on there. Apple tree abundance, Capricorn. I'm gonna keep it simplistic because I know it's how you like it. You're manifesting abundance. And this card says, what does your heart want? Be free to manifest your heart's desires here. This just came through. I feel like for some of you, I would detach, even though Capricorns kind of don't care, but I do kind of get, though, you could be, like other people can try to have an influence on like what they want you to do. And I feel like it's wanting you to listen to your own heart, which is why the Queen of Cups is how you get through the challenge. Like listening to like your own intuitive awareness here, listening to like your own heart here. Let's clarify this. Some of you could be moving, like there could be something in regards to like a home or a house, possibly. I know it's not all you, but I see that. Seeing a lot of trees. Ace of Swords. I think this is like positivity and being able to share good news, being able to celebrate with others here. I feel like socially, this actually may be a month as well to where you may be noticing you socializing more, connecting to people more here. This is the overall energy. So 3 of Cups, Ace of Swords just represents that, this is some type of celebration here. It's like when your hard work comes to fruition and you're able to share that with other people, or other people even see you, or it's just this ability to be able to celebrate. Clarify the King of Pentacles, the lovers here. It's because y'all love what y'all do, right, Capricorn? King of Pentacles and lovers. I feel like you love what it is that you do. And that's why you work so goddamn hard. Because you're in alignment. Some of you guys could be connecting to a Gemini. I'm also getting Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, if it's a person. Strength card, 5 of Swords is a challenge. Definitely feel like this is like disconnecting from anything that is not in alignment with your values here, especially if it feels energetically depleting. Like I was saying, I made this joke earlier. I said that, especially with Mercury being in your sign, Capricorn, I said, work is fun and play and socializing is work. And so I get with your challenge, this is you just like, if there's any type of cords you need to cut, I feel like it's wanting you to cut cords to things that aren't in alignment with your values here. And but I also feel like it's wanting you to keep in mind everybody else's values, like the ones that you care about, like make sure that you're, not neglecting them. Does that make sense? 8 of Wands and the Justice card. Because you're working so hard, I feel like things are just as being established with the Justice card. And it's because it's being ordered and structured, and nobody does it better than Capricorn than a Capricorn. Which is allowing quick progress with the 8 of Wands. What you put in is right what you get back with the Justice card. It's the law of attraction, really, the law of balance. So it's almost like you're skyrocketing here. Your success could even be skyrocketing. Yeah. Ten of Pentacles and the Two of Cups is here in the position of something that you're unaware of here. I definitely would pay attention to other people's needs, especially the people that you care about, your loved ones and stuff like that. I don't know why it's coming through. It just is. Others of you, if you're looking for some type of advice, or if you need some sort of guidance, I feel like it could actually come through maybe somebody you know in your family. It doesn't have to be necessarily like blood family. It could be just people that you consider like you're the closest to you, that day ones. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. Page of Swords and the Queen of Cups. Anything that you need to communicate as far